I often reflect, our time together and visiting with you, and I'd sit there, watch a game at Wrigley Field, or I'm watching that World Series, and I'm thinking, this guy started as a minor league player, in the mid '70s, and then he's a minor league manager. And the number of games you managed and the number of baseball you've seen up to this point is just remarkable to me. When you reflect back on you as a young manager in the early years with the Angels in the minor league system, and then even the early years in Tampa, how were you different by the time you got to the Cubs and at the end of your career?
Oh, it's great. And you understand this. You have to work the outposts. You have to make your mistakes away from Broadway somehow, right? You have to take chances. You have to know what you know. A lot of people in today's world don't really know what they say they know, because a lot of it's done. There's presenters and then there's teachers. There's way too many presenters in the world today and not enough teachers that really know their stuff. So
Yeah.
all these outposts, whether it was the backfields at Gene Autry Park, whether it was Idaho Falls Angels, whether the Salem Angels, the Midland Angels, all these different places I went to manage, or the scouting up in, whether I went to Utah, Colorado, New Mexico, Nebraska, Kansas, all these different places in these different cities. And you travel and you just really, you just learn every day. You learn, and then you learn by your mistakes, obviously, but there's a lot of mistakes to be made. But all these outposts is where you try things, and then you figure out what you think works and what doesn't work. And you'd be surprised, and you won't be surprised a lot. It pops. It'll pop in a moment. Something will pop in a moment. And I don't want to start getting into those, but things that I've done in the past, good or bad, that I'll bring to bear with the Cubbies or the Rays or the Devil Rays that I had experienced in the past. It appeared to be extemporaneous, only in the fact that I drew on something from my past that I thought worked, or I stayed away from something from the past that I thought didn't work. So it's just this fluidity and flexibility of thought that is gained over years through experience, wisdom, intuition. There's a great new book by Laura Huang. You already know. Laura Huang is a professor at Northeastern University up in the Boston area. Great book. And she talks about how all of these intuition and wisdom and experience really matters in today's decision-making, whereas analytics gets all the credit. And to me, final point, analytics provides a safety net for decision making. Right now, everybody goes for it on fourth down for one reason and one reason only, because it's supported. That's all. Because if it doesn't work, analytics has already provided the safety net for it not working. Whereas in the past, you didn't have a safety net. It was your gut feeling. It was your wisdom, your experiences that either chose you. You make the decision to go for it or not. And then if you were wrong, wow, you get skewered. If you were right, you were brilliant. Different.
I used to always make the argument about analytics. In baseball, maybe it makes sense. Joe Maddon gets up 500 times a year. He's played 10 years. There's 5,000 at-bats. We know that he can hit a fastball. We know he has a harder time with a slider, whatever, based on all that stuff. In football, we're talking about 4th and 1s. Maybe you have 20 of them, 25 of them over the course of a season for one team. And every one of those situations is different. I mean, there were games where we were dominant on the offensive line. We rushed for 220 yards. You get into 4th and 1 late in the game, you say, of course we're going for it. We're knocking the hell out of these guys. There were other games we rushed for 37 yards on 31 carries. They were dominating us. And you say, okay, maybe we should punt it this time and play to our defense. And I always say it's important. Analytics is important. You want all that information as a decision maker. But at the end of it, you got to watch the game. And you got to decide what's the best decision for this team at this time. And I was up at West Point doing some deal this winter. And obviously that's high stakes. These guys there's four-star generals making these life and death decisions. And something they said really resonated with me. The guys said, hey, analytics can take you to a point, and we're getting more and more information now. So that point's farther along than it used to be. And we love that. But there's always a gap between the information and the decision. The information is always incomplete, right? So there's a gap, and the gap is smaller now, and that gap gets filled by the judgment of the leader, the judgment of the decision maker. And I'm not so sure we give that as much credit as it deserves and needs.
The gap is your experience. That's the gap.
Yeah.
The gap is filled through your experience. I've been talking about that recently. Also, the game begins with the game plan. Your game begins with the game plan. But when it goes sideways, what happens? You don't like reinstitute or print out a whole bunch of new game plans. It's what's in your head to make your adjustments. Experience, intuition. That is the how shall I say, the analytics in the moment. That's your experience is this human analytics, and that's not spoken about enough. And back to what you were talking about earlier, not every 4th and 1 situation is created equally, and not every 3-0 count is created equally.
Exactly.
Not every third time through the batting order is created equally. And analytics always clumps everything up into buckets. With a label on them, third time through, 3-0 counts, etc. And you're always supposed to treat them the same way. And that's where the breakdown occurs. And that's where the experience, that's that gap you're talking about. So I'm a big believer in all that. I've had arguments about 3-0 counts. The 4th and 1 makes I immediately thought about the 3-0 counts in these other situations. Just people in charge understand one thing: not all these moments are created equally.